Hail Zamet, peace gods and goddess. Um, this video is just simply about the current state of America. Okay, um, pretty much describing what the current state of this empire is in and how it relates to us as African Americans, Black Americans, or whatever you want to call yourself as Black people in America. How this relates to us, because it is important to understand that America currently is externally being cut out of global trade and economic markets. Okay, what we see happening right now is the U.S. is pretty much losing its power as the fucking global gatekeeper of wealth. All right. After World War II, the U.S. pretty much designed and operated the systematic infrastructure of the world using the Burton system. They pretty much forced countries onto the U.S. dollar, created the World Bank and the IMF. And on top of this, it is important to note the amount of overseas U.S. military bases after World War II skyrocketed. Okay, it went the fuck up. Oh, brother, it went up. Okay, and so what you begin to see is that a lot of these nations that the U.S. was occupying begin to face the sort of gangster extortion you see in mob families. What I'm saying is that the U.S. painted themselves as protectors while simultaneously being the very threat that they were protecting these nations from. So as time went on, you have to understand that the U.S. begins to lose its economic dominance that it held. Um, so when manufacturing was pushed abroad, okay, China absorbed so much global production, and the U.S. at the same time was becoming debt and finance driven. Okay, you have countries developing while we are declining. Okay, World War II made America very, very arrogant. Okay, very arrogant. I can't stress that enough. A lot of the sanctions that they used on these other nations are the very reason that we are seeing these nations develop today. Okay, and tech the sanctions are a prime example of this because when the U.S. was attempting to control advanced manufacturing tools, okay, chip designs, and even put a certain chokehold on supply chains, the same thing we see them trying to do today. What this made those very same nations do was then develop their own domestic chip, develop their own domestic software, and they also begin to regionally trade with each other versus trading with the West. Okay, so these very nations was beginning to wake up to the true intentions of America, and so after they begin to lose their economic grip, the next step to this was pretty much losing the moral appearance that America had. Okay, what I'm pretty much saying is that the Middle East wars, Iraq, Afghanistan, all those things that America was in, all of those Middle East interventions, made the world see or made those nations see how morally incompetent America really is. America has no morals. Okay, it tricked the world for a little bit, but then it immediately woke it back up. Okay, so all of that liberal democracy, all of the anti-communism, anti-terrorist talk, nobody believes that bullshit anymore. We know exactly what you guys are doing. Okay, see, what America was offering to these countries was a sense of access, a sense of opportunity, a sense of advancement and protection, but only in a system in which they do not control. Okay, see, these nations could pretty much have a sense of independence, but only within the U.S. And this is the very same tool that they use to control Black Americans. Okay, and so for us, what that would look like on a more local populated scale is we have citizenship with no real sovereignty. Okay, no real sovereignty at all. We cannot do. We are not. We are barely citizens in this country. Um. Um. Let me see. We are included. Okay, we are included with no level of control or anything. So we are included in the government, we are included in local offices and all these different type of things, but we still virtually have no control over anything whatsoever. Okay, we have rights. Okay, but we have no real way of protecting these rights. We have no real way of upholding them. We have no real way of enforcing them. Okay, and we do not have the ability. More importantly, we do not have the ability to administer punishment when those rights are being violated, and we see this time and time again. We are very visible to the world, but we don't hold any leverage or any stake inside the world. Okay, so for for those nations that we're talking about in question, what this looked like on a global scale by the U.S. empire was development loans with very terrible conditions. Okay, they had access to this trading system, but they could not control the rules, even though that it dominated in places in which they reside. Okay, they had protection, but it was only if they aligned themselves with the U.S. and independence. The independence of these nations could only be allowed within the U.S. system. Okay, so this is why we see BRICS, the BRICS nations created today. Okay, because these nations was only created in order to alleviate the leverage of these U.S. institutions on their land and in their region. Okay, so when you think of BRICS, these are not. This is not just a group of nations coming together to necessarily develop or create a new currency. Okay, that's not their goal, and they are not necessarily an anti-American group or anything of that nature. Okay, what we are seeing from BRICS is we are just simply seeing them promote the use of the tools that they have in each of those nations and to share that with one another. Okay, they are not necessarily creating a new currency. They are using the local currencies that they already have and trading with those currencies, adding value to it outside of the U.S. system, while on top of all of that, creating their own regional supply chain so they do not have to deal with supplying through the West. Okay, they are creating banks and institutions. So what this would do in turn is this stops the U.S. from being able to punish these nations when they act on their own behalf of independence. Okay, what this literally alleviates that thumb that America had on these nations. In a sense, these nations have a legal right to say no. China has a legal right to tell America you cannot come here. Russia has the legal right to tell them you cannot have a military presence. Do you understand? They have a legal right to say no because they are operating within their own regions. And so this is pretty much this is pretty much where black America black Americans are. Okay? America structurally and systematically locked us into the American system. Okay, every time that we tried to build a parallel economy or a parallel political system and an ideology that was outside of the U.S., okay, it was always violently repressed and violently punished. Okay, and then they begin to give incentives for being loyal to America. Okay, and so to be American was safer for blacks. Okay, and even to this day it is safer. You understand? So when we talk about loyalty in question, you have survivor loyalty, which is just simply saying I want to be safe and stable. I'm not necessarily loyal to you, but I want to be safe and stable. Okay, you then have identity loyalty, and that is pretty much a black American saying I am American above all things. Okay, and then you have strategic loyalty, meaning that this alliance that we have can serve us both long term on an equal scale. Okay, see, the problem isn't necessarily the survival loyalty because we all do have a sense of wanting to be safe and stable. Okay, the problem with black America is the identity loyalty and a strategic loyalty. Okay, because neither one of those has really done anything for us. Okay, when we talk about strategic loyalty, the interests of the government, of the U.S. government, has never and never will serve the interests of black people. So, black Americans strategically aligning themselves with the U.S. results in a one-handed deal. Okay, America gets the better hand. We provide to their economy. We add to their economy. We add to their pretty much global perception, but we do not get anything. Okay, we don't get anything when you identify uh with America, when with such a loyalty. Okay, uh you are pretty much just accepting the elevation of like conditional rights, okay, and selective advancement. They select what blacks they want to advance. That's the whole Talenton 10 theory. They select what blacks they want to advance, and they give us conditional rights that literally change all the time. It changes. They change when they want to. Do you understand? So it is to a sense a very simple answer for black America. We need leverage. Do you understand? America is declining. Right now is the perfect time to be hardly refusing the American identity and what comes with it. Okay, because this isn't a declining empire. You should not want to identify with a declining empire anyway. Okay, but the thing is that Black Americans, we are legally bound to America. We are very legally bound here. You understand? Especially the more we try to fight to become citizens. Um, and so we have to preserve the ability to align ourselves with other nations. If we continue to heavily associate ourselves with America, then the rest of the nations is going to take us as American patriots, when in fact we are not, especially considering that our strategic alignment with America is not up to par. It is not an equal hand exchange. Do you understand? Um, we should not be encouraging any sort of economic growth in the US. Black owned businesses that is profiting in in our communities is not enough. Those same businesses has to take it upon themselves to look outside of the US currency, whether it's crypto or any other thing, to slowly take away the black economic success away from America. Because we part of what America is succeeding on has always been black American business. Do you understand? We are very big consumers. It is really that simple. Um, so we should not be encouraging and helping the U.S. economy expand. We should in fact look for it to fall. Do you understand? That leaves an opening for us to assume control. Um, and so when we talk about um, this economic building, okay, we have to be able to leverage some sort of digital networking. Okay, we have to be able to network online and develop more entrepreneurship amongst the diaspora. Okay, we have to help influence this transition from the Western control of the world. We have to aid the rest of the world in transitioning off the American dollar. Okay, so when I talk about who our allies can be, we are not just talking about Africans. But heavily we are talking about Africans, but we also talking about Russians, the Chinese, the South Americans. We could literally be aligning ourselves with all of the enemies of America in order to help ourselves do better. Do you understand? These are our allies, and they are proving it. They're not proving it by directly doing anything for Black Americans. They prove that they are our allies by heavily opposing the American and Western way of life. Okay, so when we talk about um, a practical leverage here. One of, outside of the economic thing, we are also talking about a weapon of mass deterrence. We have to have a regional weapon of mass deterrence. Do you understand? Something that's feasible even within the region that we are in. This is the only way that we are going to become independent. Um, we have to economically separate ourselves as well as practically have some sort of deterrent. um, because what's pretty much happening is that all of our radical leaders um, sought to establish this. They sought to establish this level of sovereignty, but every time they were violently killed. And when they were violently killed and repressed, what would happen is that they would then reward the person who is pushing the more American identity. Okay, dependency um, on the American nation, especially at this time, is very, very dangerous. Okay, this empire is falling. Not only did this empire do us wrong, but it is failing. This empire is failing. We have nothing to cling on to. Right now, it's time for us to align ourselves with more foreign powers.